Are you watching the United Shades episode about the Puget Sound John Brown Gun Club and the good work they are doing to actively end white supremacy by violence? Just understand that being on my show is bringing a lot more harassment their way. Do what you can to support them. He's literally raising money. CNN is raising money for Antifa. Keep in mind that the viewers who took that advice, who followed CNN's guidance and sent money to Antifa, helped fund Saturday's terror attack.
So this is Louis, and I have remained fairly silent in the last few days because I've been busy with work. But there's been a lot going on, and I thought that rather than continue to say nothing, I would talk about a few things. I guess I'll save the Trump tweets for another video or maybe a stream or something, because there's actually a lot that can be said there about what Tucker Carlson called the four morons of the apocalypse, which is Presley, Ilhan Omar, AOC, and Tlaib. In some ways, this is smart of Trump to do, but also in some ways poorly articulated. He is definitely, in my view, in the right, but unfortunately, originally, he tripped up a little bit. And while he doesn't care about the flack he's going to get from, like, David French and, like, Ben Shapiro, Jonah Goldberg, and all the fucking neocons, he doesn't care. So it's like them calling him a racist, anyone calling him a racist, it's just, you know, the duck says quack. As I said on Twitter, like, you're just saying what you've always said, what you're seemingly only capable of saying, so who gives a shit? You said this over and over again in 2016, what does it matter? This isn't overtly racist material. This is in some ways just him trying to speak to something that is in fact true, but is just being inarticulate in doing so. He's a boomer. He's what, 71 years old? And he's not very articulate. I don't really hold it against him for being inarticulate in trying to express something that he's concerned with that, in my view, is a destabilizing force that could result in the discontinuation of the United States. So my focus as a nationalist is the continuation of the United States. And the focus of these people who are going to ICE facilities and government facilities and raising Mexican flags, not because they're even Mexican or non-white, but because they're white middle-class leftists who hate America, that should show you that we have a sickness and a rot in our society. And Trump calling it out and paying attention to it is not a bad thing, even if he can't perfectly articulate what he's taking issue with. And he's repeatedly talked about this on Twitter. He keeps going and going and going. And people are trying to claim that he means this or that. And it's like, listen, all the guy is saying is that there are people in this country that hate this country and he wants them to leave. And I agree with him. You know, I just did a video called Obey the Law or Get Out. It's not very complicated what I mean by that. And Trump is also equally not very complicated in his messaging. So rather than, like, make it this super erudite explanation in terms of what he means, just take him at a face value. He's saying if you hate the country, why don't you just leave? It's not a complicated message, and in my view, it's a lot more difficult for me to understand how you are misconstruing that. You know, in my view, it's just you not being generous towards him. You're thinking the worst, or you're trying to complicate a message that is otherwise simple. And it is a righteous message. It is an actual question that needs to be asked, because we can only have too many anarchists and revolutionaries in this country before everything falls the fuck apart. And how is it a problem that Trump is raising this question when seemingly these people are all over the country? I don't really fault Trump for not perfectly articulating a serious question that needs to be asked of all of us. I mean, so long as we give a shit about the continuation of the United States. Like, if you actively are cheerleading the downfall of the nation, then by all means, I understand why you don't care. And why you're just sympathetic and ultimately fine with these people doing what they're doing. But getting to the bigger story, in my view, which is this terrorist, Willem van Spransen, you know, this to me is just the classic example of, like, this is exactly who Trump is talking about. This is exactly who I'm talking about. This is the reason why I have walked away from the Democratic Party and why I've walked away from the left. And I do owe you guys a video in regards to that. I don't believe I ever have done a video explaining exactly why I went from being somebody that supported Bernie Sanders in 2016 to where I am now, where, you know, I'm now a Republican. I recognize I do owe you guys that video, but it's something that I have only in some way thought about just recently. And it's mainly been because of the continual just stagnation of the left, to where so many people on the left are just playing by the rules of the progressives and the socialists, which is what progressives are. They're seemingly unable to stand up to these people, and I think that based on that, it's been one of the reasons why have been in many ways cast out of the left, but also I have walked away from the left, because I don't believe that they are capable at this point of doing anything but just laying down to these people. And rather than just saddle up with the people that are going to do what my enemies want them to do, I'd rather just join the side that's going to actively fight against them. Even though I might have my problems with some of the people on what is now my side, our side. And I do have problems with people that are on the right, or are Republicans, or are conservatives. I do have problems with them. The only difference is that I don't think that outside of, like, you know, some lunatic neocons and globalist types, you know, the internationalist right, which is diminishing, outside of those people, I don't think that there's very many people on the right that actively want to overthrow the American government and want this country to fucking fall. There seems to be very few of those people. They are present, but they're very few, and because of Trump, they have been quashed. Everyone fucking hates them, seemingly. And the ones that don't, they shut the fuck up. Or else they get frickin' clubbed over the head by social norms. Not necessarily with physical force, but just other Republicans, conservatives, what have you, just saying, no, you're wrong, shut the fuck up. And that's fine by me, because I think the internationalist right should die. They are as much a cancer as is the internationalist left. But to the point of this terror attack, I want to cover this because this, to me, is one of the biggest news stories of the year. At least for now. I mean, who knows? Maybe some other wacko leftist is going to fucking firebomb another government facility. But the reason that this is important is for two reasons. Two primary reasons, okay? The first is principle. And if you listen to my last stream, and I still got to edit that video and put it up, where I talk about why people are afraid of Muslims or Islamists and why they're not afraid of, you know, principled right-wingers, the big difference between the left and the right at this point is that the left is seemingly more than willing to engage in violence. This guy was celebrated all across Twitter, all across the socialist progressive left. I've seen so many people run down different left-wingers and different Democrats and say, do you disavow this terror attack? Do you disavow this violence? And they just run. I have not seen one person, and I mean this, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I've yet to see it. I've yet to see a single Democrat, a single leftist say, this is horrible, I'm glad this guy's dead, something like that, you know what I mean? Like, it's not to say that just because you're not saying anything, because maybe you're busy with something else, that you're not aware of this or whatever. So ignorance isn't guilt or association. But it is to say, if you're asked about this and you're aware of it, you know, are you on board with Antifa terrorism? And if you're reflex is, obviously I'm not, this was horrible and I'm glad everyone's safe, and fuck this guy, I'm glad he's dead. If that's your response, which is the easiest thing to say, then no one has a bone to pick with you anymore. However, that has not been the case. I've seen people endorse this, I've seen people, even fucking Telcom X endorse this. You know, people have been endorsing this, and if they haven't been endorsing this, they have just been avoiding the question of whether or not they endorse this left-wing violence. Because in all honesty, is anyone surprised by this attack when all you've had for weeks and weeks is rhetoric about, oh my God, these children are locked up and these, you know, illegals, they're all, you know, it's concentration camps, as Cortez coined, and all the rest of it. Are you really surprised that some freaking lunatic showed up and tried to firebomb this facility? Are you really surprised? You know, this is the danger of endorsing what is just overtly targeted rhetoric. I understand the difference between the very specific issue of inciting violence, which legally is very specific. It's imminent danger, and I agree with that assessment. But in this case, what Cortez did is not incitement to that degree, but it is loose language that in some ways is going to give permission of conscience to radicals. And I would say that while I'm not demanding any kind of apology or any explanation from AOC. What I would like is from her specifically, and anyone else that has made light of this kind of violence, to just come up with to just say, in fact, what their principles are. If you don't agree with political violence, just say it. It's the easiest thing to say, and that's my position as well, that political violence is uncalled for and anything but a third world shithole. And the United States is not a third world shithole. So I don't care what side you're on, you should not be engaging in political violence. It is something that should not be occurring in a civilized society with individual rights and law and order. We have all the things necessary, all the avenues, mechanisms necessary for political outlet. If you want political change, all the systems exist to see it changed. Maybe not immigration. But for everything else but that, or a Pentagon that's not operating on a totally blank check mindset and where they obscure everything and no one has a problem with it, apparently. Outside of a few things, you can remedy whatever your political cause is in terms of actually seeing it in action. Things are not dire enough to where we need to be firebombing ICE facilities or whatever else, other kind of lunatic shit that's currently going on with the left. If this was some other kind of nation, then maybe I would think, otherwise. With the UK, goddamn, is that country approaching the point of political violence being justified when you're jailing dissenters so that you can murder them? I mean, when we're talking about the UK, that is very bleak right now. But in the United States, we're not in any way equitable, in my view. We have our serious problems at hand, and I agree that we have a serious rot and sickness here, but despite it all, we are not anywhere near that degree, where we have a corrupt court system and everything else is corrupt, where we're just jailing dissenters on anything that we can get them on for the sake of murdering them. We're nowhere near that bad. So when this dude, 69-year-old Willem Van Spronsen, shows up at an ICE facility to try to firebomb the facility, but which, by the way, is like, what's the line? Isn't there some kind of left-wing line about murdering people for freedom or something like that? Whatever it is with war, bombing them in the name of liberty, whatever. Bombing them into freedom, whatever it was with Iraq. This is the kind of same thing where it's like you're going to firebomb a facility where these people are housed. Do you realize that you could easily have killed all these different people in your act of freaking, your act of bravery as a freedom fighter? You're going to kill a whole bunch of illegals as you try to ignite propane tanks and as you light cars on fire. And I believe he tried to firebomb the building too, because there was like windows broken with like burn marks all over them. I believe he tried to firebomb the facility itself. And it's like I say, like, if you start a fire in a building, there's a very serious chance that you could kill everyone inside. So, I mean, there is no question that this was not only one, a firebombing. This absolutely was a firebombing. This is by the definition of what a firebombing is. 2, this was an act of terrorism. This, in every way, was an act of terrorism. And I'm grateful that so far I've seen nobody, and I haven't checked any left-wing sources because I don't read them, but I'm grateful that at least from the sources I have read, no one is calling this anything but what it was, a straight-up terror attack. Because that is, in fact, what this was. The reason he did this was to inspire terror. That was the goal of this. Not just, we're going to free the... I mean, you break into the facility, you try to free the people, okay, then it's still an act of terror in my view, but at least I can understand that you're trying to free these people you see as, not even like prisoners of war, but, internment members or whatever the fuck you're going to call them. But in this instance, you literally tried to kill these people. That's all you did. And in that instance, like, there's no other way to conceive of this but as a terror attack. It's like, the Muslims that when they struck the Twin Towers, they weren't trying to destroy the Twin Towers. That wasn't a terror attack per se. They were trying to raise awareness of Middle Eastern politics, by collapsing 2 buildings and murdering thousands of people. That was the goal. It would be like that kind of thing. Like, it's absurd. And it's the same with this. In every single way conceivable, this was simply about doing as much damage as possible. The only thing is that this guy was a left-wing activist, so he was completely incompetent in doing so. I'm not 100% sure on the science of it, but I think propane, because I think it's more concentrated than natural gas, that makes it, doesn't it make it more flammable than natural gas? I don't really know. But the guy tried to blow up this huge propane tank, and it's like, what do you think the result of that would have been? You could have killed civilians, you could have killed officers, law enforcement agents, you could have killed the illegals you claim to be wanting to save. I mean, not just yourself. If you kill yourself, I don't give a fuck, but you're going to kill all these other people, and you call yourself someone that's in favor of justice? But none of these people are sane. That's how you know you're dealing with somebody who's a terrorist, is that none of these people are in their right mind. But honestly, as you've heard me say before, I don't feel sorry for these people. I don't feel sorry for anybody that's going to show up with a rifle and incendiary devices and be like, yo, I'm going to start assassinating cops. He hit a hard target, so let's start with that. So, ideally, for people on our side that don't endorse terrorism, we want these terrorists, these left-wing terrorists, to in fact attack hard targets, like this guy did. He attacked a facility that, like many of these facilities, are in some ways ready. They have the capacity to deal with attacks. If you attack a police station, if you attack a fort, if you attack a government facility, whatever it happens to be, it's not true in every instance, but normally there's a lot of people within that facility that are armed. I know on forts, government or military facilities, that a lot of people within those facilities are in fact unarmed. I don't really know how many people know that, but I know this from living near an airbase, that a lot of people in the facility are unarmed. And I think there's, a ban or something like that. I don't really know what the protocol is on military infrastructure and military facilities. I just know that almost no one is armed. But the fact is still, the way that they're built with, the fences, the gates, and all the rest, they're in some ways barricaded and prepared for violent attacks. It's when they happen already within the facility that they're unprepared. But when it's from the outside, they're in some ways prepared. They're built so they can sustain, at least to some degree, an offensive attack. And there's many government facilities that have that direct benefit. So, you walk into an FBI building, you walk into, an ICE detention center, you walk into whatever it happens to be, you have officers, agents, public workers there that are already armed and ready to potentially take on a threat. Not only that, but many of these people are already trained to deal with that kind of violence. When it comes to the police, if you walk in with a rifle and you open fire, you might be able to do some damage, and unfortunately, I'm trying to not make light of this, but you can probably kill a couple officers, but there's a very high chance that you're going to get taken out because of, reinforced doors that are locked, that you require access to from already inside. Like, there are many precautions that police stations and other facilities have to prevent your direct entry. So if you attack them directly, it's very hard to get within them and do much damage before the officers can bulk up in terms of body armor, arm themselves, the rest of it, and respond. So it's very hard to attack them directly. And the people within them already have training to take you on in terms of violence. And that's why I very much appreciate police, soldiers, federal agents, and all the rest of it, because unlike me and everyone else that are pussy civilians, these guys are ready and willing to engage in violence against villains or criminals or bad guys, as people would say. They're ready. We're not. And so we, on our side, we want these terrorists to target government agents, police, soldiers. And it's not to say that I'm making light of the danger that, I'm not putting these people in danger. These people exist regardless of what I say or do. But I'd rather that these people take on people that are prepared than pussy civilians. Because as we've seen with Muslim terror attacks, they work. They not only decimate civilians, but they also create mass fear. And that is the point of terrorism. Muslim attacks work because they're intelligent enough to attack civilian populations because the goal is fear, and they are attacking soft targets. That's the other side of this, is who you target. It's not just in the efficacy of attacking that target. The only unfortunate side for these terrorists is that in rural parts of this country, anything but the inner city, most people are either going to know somebody that has a firearm, or going to be around somebody that has a firearm, or has a firearm themselves. Like, if you see me out there and I'm in a bad area and you start doing something crazy, well, there's a good chance that I have a firearm. And I am one of the good guys. I'm one of the people that has a firearm to use, not for criminal intention, but for the sake of my own protection and that of others, you know, should I be put in that scenario. Because I'm not going to just let people be shot while I'm sitting there. I'm going to take action and hopefully kill you before you can hurt other people.
I don't know if you're aware, but this is a civilized land now. We didn't kill all them savages only to allow the likes of you to act like human dignity and basic decency was outmoded or not yet invented. This thing, it's done.
In Europe, unfortunately, because of their own stupid policies and beliefs, they have completely disarmed their own population, and their own populations are completely forced. They have a forced dependency on police and law enforcement officials. And unfortunately, when you're like the UK and your government is just, you know, you might as well have a mass conversion in the United Kingdom. Like, I know I have 11% of my audience is British. It's a really bleak time in your country right now, and I'm not going to bullshit you on that. I look at what's happening in your country, and I am shocked. And all it says to me is, you know, no Muslim immigration at all, period, and maybe whatever it's called, repatriation, whatever the word is. Like, maybe we need to start doing some of that, even here now. Because the Muslim center of the country is in Minnesota from Ilhan Omar's district, and that district has a problem with freaking terrorist recruitment. So even within the small centers they have in this country now, they're already an epicenter of fucking terror recruitment and just Muslim, what should I say, to not get myself banned off of YouTube. I'll just leave it alone. Put it like that. I'm going to get myself fucking banned. But the reason why the Muslims are so effective is because they know enough to not attack hard targets, and they have the benefit of attacking disarmed populations that are utterly dependent on federal law enforcement and the law enforcement in their area who are seemingly on the side of the terrorists. I know how that sounds, but that's just how I interpret it. I'm sorry, but when I see, Muslim pedophile after Muslim pedophile being let off, and yet you're jailing dissenters for almost a year in order to get them murdered, I just kind of get the feeling that I'm waiting for your government to declare itself a caliphate and demand the public have a mass conversion to Islam. I just kind of get that feeling. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I am. I don't really see it as anything but that. However, getting back to this particular story with this particular Antifa terrorist, this is the best case scenario. And like I said, I'm not trying to make light of the danger that this puts law enforcement in, but this is your job. This is what we need you to do for us. And, like, what's the point in having a fucking union if none of the unions are going to actually speak out about this? It's one of the things that I can't stand about police unions. It's like, yeah, these people are actively targeting us, and they are. They're trying to assassinate us, but no, let's just keep quiet because, oh man, we might be perceived as being right-wing and partisan. It's like, well, I guess you guys can go ahead and get shot then if you're not going to speak out against it. You know, I have seen certain union guys, head of the unions for police, come out and say, like, yes, there is this problem here, but it's been, like, few and far between. Like, if you're working for the government and you have a union that represents you, maybe complain to them and say, like, hey, should we not put out a press release about this? Can we not go on television? Because I have seen union reps go on, like, Fox News and stuff and say, like, yes, there are people in this country that are targeting police and are hoping to assassinate us. And it's like, I'm almost getting misty here. Like, I'm being legit with you guys. Like, maybe I didn't get enough sleep last night, but I'm getting emotional here. And not, like, in an angry way. Like, it's like, this is legitimately upsetting me. Like, I feel so fucking bad for cops. I really do. Like, I understand there's the whole meme of, like, the crazy cop that's gonna hurt people, but Jesus Christ, like, what is it coming to? Where you have terrorists in this country that are actively targeting law enforcement, and law enforcement can't even speak out against it. Like, they can't even fucking defend themselves without getting, like, fired or taken off the force or given desk duty or punished in some way. Like, I really don't want to make things sound bleak, because I don't really believe them to be in this country. I do think that so long as we continue to fight against these kind of people and we highlight what's going on, the reality of the situation, and the fact that somebody like Andy Ngo, he's documented this guy. That's the craziest part of this, is that Andy Ngo has been tweeting about this guy, this Willem dude. He actually had run into this guy several times. It's like, holy fuck. Like, this guy was on the radar of our people, of people like Andy Ngo, like our side, the internet, you know, Fifth Estate, alternative media. Like, this guy was known, and he just firebombed an ICE facility and got himself shot to death by police.
I actually had cross paths with the attacker back in December. He was part of the John Brown Gun Club militia that attempted to prevent me from recording an Antifa demonstration in downtown Seattle. And they accosted me carrying with their rifles on their chests to intimidate me. So at that time, that was, you know, it really forced me to realize the potential for violence. I mean, this movement claims that they will only engage in violence in self-defense, but under Antifa's definition of self-defense, it's actually premeditated and offensive. So the ideology paves way for what we saw over the weekend.
It's about time that the mainstream, and I don't care who that is, whether it's you know, Congress, whether that's the White House, whether that's the mainstream media, I don't give a shit who it is. We need to start taking this seriously. It isn't just the meme of, oh, let's get these guys labeled as terrorists. No, bro, these people are terrorists. Like, regardless of how you actually want to qualify them, they are, in fact, engaging in terrorism. And just because you don't want to call these people terrorists doesn't mean they're not engaging in terrorism. Because what is this, like the third or fourth serious violent attack that we've seen in however many weeks or months? It's getting fucking crazy. And do we have to have a whole new wave of cop assassinations like before with Black Lives Matter supporters? Like, do we have to have a whole new wave of cop assassinations before this can become appropriate to talk about again? Like, and even there, at least the FBI was willing to classify the black identity extremists as, in fact, terrorists and terrorist sympathizers. Because they are! That is what their goals are, is to commit terror. They want to make law enforcement afraid of them. And they want the civilian population to also be cowed. That's the whole point of this, is to get everyone to shut up, stand down, and let these people run wild. That's the whole basis of all of this, because that's exactly what's happened in Europe with the Muslims. That was the intention, and they achieved it. I swear to God, in Europe, the Muslims have won. All the governments are cowed, all the people are cowed, with some notable exceptions, and they're lambasted as being bigoted and this and that. Well, no, they're the only ones in Europe that are standing up against terrorism, because that's what's been going on. It isn't just, oh, the invasion and the cultural colonialism and that sort of thing. No, it is terrorism. That is the point. It is to cow all of us to shut up. That is the goal, because once we do, nothing is stopping them from taking over. And that is what the aim of Antifa is, even though they aren't achieving it. Even though they are incompetent in actually pursuing their goals, in attacking hard targets and attacking people that are trained in violence, it doesn't dispute what their fucking aims are, and that is to get all of us to be afraid of them. And if you're a law enforcement officer, their goal is to cow you and to get you to quit. Because that's what we've seen in Portland and other leftist cities, is what happens when everyone's attacking the police. The police are handcuffed themselves in terms of their actions and what they can do, and all the rest of it, and enforcing the laws, naturally. They'll quit. And that's the goal. That is what their aim is. That is what they're trying to do, just on a nationwide scale. And it includes federal law enforcement. So, in my view, the goal on our part is to not back down, to back up and side with law enforcement in doing their job, regardless of what your beliefs are in the federal government, because the government, and yes, I am now a Republican, and welcome to the side of the government. Not that I necessarily disagree, but the fact is that even if you disagree with the law, and I said this in my previous commentary, just because you disagree with the law doesn't mean that it's the fault of law enforcement in doing what they have been tasked to do. We have all the mechanisms necessary to challenge existing laws and to promote new laws, But we should not be taking our disagreement with political officials, with politicians, by doing, by committing actions against law enforcement for doing what they are tasked in doing. We should be taking issue with the politicians and those that are tasked with actually passing laws. And if these people, these terrorists, had any legitimacy, they would be doing that. They would recognize that political violence is, in principle, wrong, and they would be, in fact, engaging in trying to pass or remove legislation. That's the correct way to go about things in a civilized first world society. It isn't assassinating law enforcement. I recognize that there are people that are within law enforcement that should not be there, that are either corrupt, incompetent, or just unprofessional, and that I'm sure most of us would recognize they probably shouldn't be in those roles. Maybe they should be a security guard and not a cop, or what have you. However, I do believe that despite flaws that exist in every single fucking institution and with every individual, we should be standing by those in law enforcement that are still, in fact, the thin blue line between us, the pussy civilians, and the fucking terrorists. Because the fact is, and this isn't hyperbole, the fact is that we live in a dysfunctional, unhealthy society in which we are now dealing with hordes of indoctrinated terrorists. Like I said, the only thing standing between us and them, us the flabby, dumpy, pussified, civilians, and them are the police, are law enforcement. And I respect that. I respect the fact that, I owe, not just necessarily my own self-defense, because I rarely have a pistol for that reason, but in terms of the greater whole of society, we owe these people for our defense. We owe these people. We need these people to defend us. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that defense. And so I believe, maybe we have to start doing some activism on our part to bolster morale and protection for law enforcement agents, for these people. And it could be small things like giving them like disposable pens or, hand wipes or hand gel or, I don't know, passing legislation so they have, more comfortable uniforms or better body armor or whatever would bolster their morale, whatever would make them more effective, whatever would help them do their jobs, and so that they feel comfortable in doing it and not afraid and not cowed and not resentful of a hateful public. I believe that it might be time that we engage in activism to help those in law enforcement so that they are better equipped and more able and more willing to take on the terrorists, the domestic terrorists within our own country. And I'll let you mull that over in the comment section. Let me know what you think about that idea. Maybe this is something that I need to champion. Maybe this is something that I should do. Who's to say? Let me know. Let me know what you think about that idea. And whether, you already know of activist groups or charity groups that already exist for cops that directly benefit them. Not just obscure or, they ostensibly help cops or something like that, but they in fact are doing things on the ground to help cops. Not just walking into a precinct handing over a box of donuts, but in fact doing things that will directly benefit officers and so on with law enforcement. Let me know what you think, and I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening.